We don't have to guess what they looked like. In their quest for immortality, they left behind countless portraits in full color. Hello, from Luxor, West Bank.
Today I'm taking you to the cemetery of Sheikh Abd el-Qurna, again, to show you some of my favorite tombs.
We're about to explore 3 remarkable tombs located at the foothill of Sheikh Abd el-Qurna, directly across from the Ramesseum. 2 Thutmosid and 1 early Ramessid, so from a time when funerary art was at its peak. Let's go! TT69 is dated to the end of the reign of Thutmose IV and the beginning of the reign of Amenhotep III, the first half of the 14th century BC. It belongs to Menna, the administrator of the temple estate, scribe of the grain of Amun. Someone maliciously cut out the faces of the tomb's owner to deprive him of eternal life. Perhaps this was done under Akhenaten, the son of Amenhotep III, as almost all the names of the god Amun were also removed. Luckily, numerous images of Menna's wife have survived. We read, Mistress of the House, Hennutawi. She bears a title popular among Theban noblewomen of that time, the Chantress of Amun. It was probably an honorary function, a form of lower priesthood serving the state cult. In later, Ramessid times, this title was also assumed by middle-class women. Hennutawi wears a long wig, decorated at the bottom with fine plaits, and a beaded headband with a lotus flower on the front. A big flower necklace covers her chest. She wears large, round gold earrings, richly decorated armbands and bracelets. She almost always has a fragrance ointment cone on her head. A few loose braids pulled back must have been very popular at the time. She wears a long, semi-transparent dress, often yellow or gold-hued, which noticeably widens from the waist. We can see a significant change in women's fashion in a few decades since the time of Senefer, whose tomb I showed you last time. All these paintings are separated from visitors by glass screens, but during my last visit to the tomb, I think only 2 years ago, they weren't there. And the chamber is 8 meters long and only 2 meters wide, so these delicate paintings must be protected, especially from larger groups of tourists. The plan of the tomb resembles an inverted letter T. We leave the first transverse room and enter the rear chamber, the so-called Long Hall. It's closed to visitors today, but I received special permission to enter with my camera, just for a few minutes. In this part of the tomb, the paintings have been preserved in excellent condition. I believe that soon these walls will probably be covered with glass screens, so this may be the last chance to see them this way. The ceiling decoration has survived almost intact. We have a multicolored carpet-style pattern produced from red zigzag lines with infills of diamond shapes, popular in the New Kingdom. Around the niche, intended for statues of the deceased couple, we see men bringing them offerings. The long semi-transparent tunic with short sleeves was still the most popular tailored garment of the time. Interestingly, such sleeveless tunics were unisex, found among the funeral goods of both men and women. Men wore them over the classic Egyptian kilt, shandit. Originally reserved for rulers, shandits were commonly worn already in the Old Kingdom. According to some, they may have evolved from pre-dynastic hunting skirts, which provided the wearer with unlimited freedom of movement. In the 18th dynasty, longer, flat downward sash kilts with a pleated front appeared. On the north wall we can admire an idyllic vision of the afterlife, a scene of fishing and bird hunting in the marshes, a motif that hasn't lost popularity since the mastabas of the Old Kingdom. Menna accurately hits flying ducks with his boomerangs, assisted by a beautiful wife and children. But it's the female images that seem the most interesting, less schematic and strongly individualized. In Menna's time, Egyptian women had already abandoned tight dresses with two straps, usually covering their breasts, so popular since the early dynastic times. Although they would remain the attire of goddesses and deified queens, in the middle of the 18th dynasty, women began to wear complex dresses made up of intricate arrangements of draped fabric. On the opposite wall we see Imentet, she of the West, personifying the Western necropolises. As a deity, she is of course depicted more traditionally, with a yellow complexion, previously reserved for female images. Here the deceased with his heart crosses the waters of the afterlife, Duat, to stand before the judgment of Osiris. Okay, I've put the guard's patience to the brink. Back to the first chamber. Menna, responsible for overseeing the vast temple estate, needed to stay mobile, so he traveled by chariot drawn by 2 horses. He received tributes and oversaw the measurement of grain. Once the wheat was processed, scribes measured and recorded the quantities. The scribes, as a separate caste, are dressed in wigs and semi-transparent tunics, following the example of the nobility. One of them, clearly tired, sat down on a pile of wheat. They differ significantly from the peasants shown here, with white scarves on their heads or exposing their bald heads, which in the language of pharaonic art was a symbol of poverty. We must remember that in its centuries-long history, pharaonic Egypt was primarily a typically agricultural country. All the political successes, cultural achievements that we admire to this day had their source in the fertile fields of the Nile Valley. They were the fruit of peasant toil. These anonymous peasant masses comprised perhaps as much as 80% of all the inhabitants of the two lands. Here we have a few scenes of everyday life. 2 girls got into a fight, clearly pulling each other's hair. Perhaps it was about a basket with spilled-out ears of corn lying on the ground between them. A woman, picking fruit, is nursing her child. A girl is removing a thorn from her friend's foot. And here Menna's servant is punishing a man probably accused of fraud. It's believed that most modern Egyptians are descended from them, from the peasants of the Nile Valley, the Fellahin, as the Arab invaders called the indigenous Egyptians in the 7th century AD. Just 50 meters further down the hill is our next tomb, TT 52, which dates to exactly the same time as Menna's. Nakht has a typical 18th dynasty tomb complex, an open courtyard leading to 2 inner chambers in the form of an inverted T-letter, and an underground burial chamber.
Oh my. And we've got glass again. But actually the tomb is so tiny that I find it really good that we've got this shield here.
The first chamber is only 5 by 1.5 meters and 2 meters high. Protective glass has reduced its dimensions even more, making it difficult to film here. It's beautifully decorated though. The three musicians come from a larger scene of joyful annual celebration of the beautiful Feast of the Valley, when the Theban necropolis was visited in the solemn procession by the sacred bark of Amun from Karnak. Thebans would sail in large numbers to the western bank to feast all night long at the graves of their loved ones. The display of beauty and sensuality contrasts with earlier images of women in tombs, which were always characterized by noble austerity. Musicians are shown unusually for female images with reddish-brown skin. This effect is due to the layer of varnish applied here by the artist, which darkened with time, and indeed, the lighter color clearly shows through in several places. In the higher register, we see a blind musician singing and playing a harp for the noble woman relaxing on mats. This is another unusual image. In contrast to the other figures, he's hunched, the folds of the belly are emphasized, and the depiction of the sole of his foot is a clear break with the canon. The group of women behind the harpist is also shown surprisingly loosely. The large almond eyes and the emphasized mouth are a preview of the new style that Amenhotep III will propose and which, let's say, will then be creatively developed by his son, Akhenaten. We'll even find the traditional granite false doors here.
Soon the false doors will be completely replaced by the funeral steles.
Nakht means strong. Everything indicates, however, that he didn't have a strong, high position in the administration. He was rather a second-rate scribe in the temple service, probably Karnak. His tomb also fell victim to Akhenaten's religious revolution. The names of Amun were removed from its walls. Of course, his wife, Tawi, titled herself Chantress of Amun. We read, enjoying themselves by looking at the good things, the products of the fields and the papyrus areas, by the serving priest of Amun, the scribe Nakht, justified, and his beloved sister, with a place in his heart, the chantress of Amun, Tawi. The northern part of the wall is much better preserved. Of course, we have a family duck hunt here. Akhenaten's supporters destroyed only a small fragment of the composition, showing a goose, commonly considered the animal of Amun. The rest is in excellent condition. Just look at the details. Nakht certainly didn't have a winery, which didn't stop him from decorating his tomb with this fashionable motif. Workers holding the ropes to not fall crush grapes in a stone press. The juice obtained is placed in large jars. This part of the chamber, although perfectly preserved, is clearly unfinished, which, as we know, is common in Egyptian tombs, regardless of the period in which they were created. The death of the owner usually meant that all work was stopped. The images remained in the form of a sketch. The columns for funeral text remained empty. The inner chamber is tiny, only 2.5 by 2 meters. Though it was fully plastered, it was left undecorated due to lack of time. It contains a large shaft descending to the burial chambers. The shaft takes up most of the floor, so for safety reasons, this room is inaccessible to visitors. Among other things, a Nakht figurine was found there. In the early 20th century, a series of excavations were carried out here and, unfortunately, the statue of Nakht was lost on the way to America in 1915. This was a tragic episode. The steamship Arabic was attacked by a German U-boat, sank off the coast of Ireland, and 40 lives were lost. The copies currently exhibited in the tomb were made based on old black and white photographs. These photographs can be admired in a permanent exhibition in the tomb's now roofed courtyard. Another 50 meters further down the hill, we come across a third tomb, 100 years younger. The owner of TT51, Userhat, was the first prophet of the royal Ka of Thutmose I, so he was the high priest of the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut's father. He lived and served during the reign of Horemheb, classified as the 18th dynasty ruler, and during the short reign of Ramses I, founder of the 19th dynasty. He died under Seti I, so we are in an early Ramessid tomb from the 13th century BC. It's one of the most beautiful tombs in Thebes, even though only the first chamber is decorated. The space is small, just 7 by 1.65 meters with a height of 2 meters. Naturally, it's the depictions of women that catch the eye. His wife, mistress of the house, beloved of Hathor, Shepset. This well-known image, as you can see, is unfinished. The delicate preliminary lines were simply filled with color, but so skillfully that a final outline wasn't even needed. Userhat pours incense oil on the pile of offerings. This is a family offering to Osiris. Behind him stands his wife holding a stalk of papyrus. All wore long, white pleated robes and magnificent jewelry recreated in great detail. This was a time of major change in pharaonic art, which from now on began to pursue greater artistry and a more painterly style than ever before. The strict focus on ideal proportions was set aside in favor of creating harmonious composition. Post-Amarna art largely broke away from the rigid rules of the traditional Egyptian canon, rules that would only return later, during the late period, when with particular sentiment, glorious past times were referred to, especially the Pyramid Age. The Sem priests purify the offerings by fumigating and pouring water. Between the priests and the offerings, funeral mourners fervently mourn the deceased. The wall at the right end of the chamber is occupied by a larger composition, showing Userhat and two women resting in the shade of the mythological tree of the Lady of the Sycamore, the last resting place before their souls enter the kingdom of Osiris. Streams of water leave the vase of the goddess, Nut or Hathor, and flow towards the beautifully decorated chalices they hold. The inscription lists the two women as his wife, house mistress and chantress of Amun, Shetsut, and his mother, chantress of Amun, Tausert. The artist has skillfully used bright contours and selected colors. Just look at how their skin tones differ subtly. It seems that he didn't want to omit any detail of their magnificent costumes and jewelry. Although well exposed, The figures are an integral part of the well-thought-out composition. Userhat wears on his chest a white necklace from which hangs a talisman featuring symbols of strength and protection. He boldly reaches for the fruit from the tray offered by the goddess. The artist devoted a lot of time to this scene. The details are amazing. Among the fruit and leaves of the tree, we see several beautifully painted birds. The souls of the Ba of the dead, traditionally shown as birds with human heads, accept the goddess' generous gifts of food and drink. The damage is caused by a clumsy attempt to cut out fragments by thieves. Thanks to old detailed illustrations from the 1920s, we know that the paintings on this wall were almost intact when they were discovered in 1903. Thieves cut large chunks of plaster from the walls and then chiseled out the eyes of most of the paintings. Only in the 1940s, some of the damage was repaired, some wasn't. Today, the walls are covered with protective glass. Long, flowing, pleated and semi-transparent robes are symbols of Ramessid nobility. However, the priests cover them with ceremonial leopard skins worn on the shoulders, which, in addition to dark spots, are also decorated with star patterns in circles. They don't pretend to be real leopard skins, as in most tombs, but show the clothes that the same priests wore in reality, most often fabric robes, only stylized as animal skin. Userhat boasts here of his distinguished lineage, mentioning among others the vizier of Thutmose I, Imhotep, as one of his ancestors. Of course, this is possible. As we know, offices were hereditary in pharaonic Egypt. The function of high priest of the pharaoh's mortuary temple could be taken over by a close relative of the vizier, and this title could remain in the family for 200 years, until Userhat's time. As in the Thutmose tombs, the ceiling is adorned with a motif of colorfully ornamented mats with which the Egyptians decorated the ceilings of their homes. The mats supported wooden beams, here shown in the form of long yellow longitudinal bands filled with text. We read: a ritual offering to Hathor, regent of the necropolis on the west of Thebes, to Isis the Great, the Divine Mother, and to all the gods of Tajeusar, that they may grant entrance and exit in the necropolis, and that my mouth may be full of food, of your giving, before Osiris to eternity. The priest's tomb cannot lack divine images, especially the god of the dead, in which Userhat planned to be reborn after death. Around the throne of Osiris sits the tribunal of 42 minor gods, known from the Book of the Dead, called the Assessors of Maat. Before them, the deceased will make a so-called negative confession. Scene of the judgment of Osiris, weighing Userhat's sins. On the scales, instead of a heart, we see a tiny image of the deceased. It's quite unusual. The falcon-headed group in the so-called Henu ritual pose represents the souls of Pe, the prehistoric rulers of the city of Buto in the Nile Delta. The jackal-headed figures are the souls of the first rulers of Nekhen, that is Hierakonpolis, in Upper Egypt. The invocation of the souls of the great ancestors is one of many royal funeral customs adopted by Theban nobles. Compared to the right, the left part of the chamber presents a much lower artistic level. Just take a look at the procession of mourners. They are poorly and carelessly drawn. Their huge shapeless eyes are placed almost in the middle of the face. Probably another, less skilled artist was employed to decorate it. We enter the second chamber. Its ceiling is held up by 4 pillars carved into the rock. This austere, unplastered room measures 6.5 by 5 meters, 3 meters high. This tiny entrance leads to a sloping corridor to the burial chamber.
Unfortunately, I can't go there.
It's pitch black here, something one of the guards attempted to resolve, but without success.
Let there be light.
Look right here.
Oh, sir, I think it's okay. We've got our light.
Okay, no problem.
You want this?
Yeah.
Or... Thank you, sir. Shukran.
Userhat shares the courtyard with several other tombs, mainly Ramessid ones. Unfortunately, they are closed to visitors, as are probably 90% of the private tombs in the Theban necropolis. Time to return to the picturesque village of Habu, where I stopped for the night.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please subscribe to my channel, like my video and leave a comment below. And if you're interested in the history of ancient Egypt, please check out my podcast. I'd like to thank all my patrons. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. You know that without you, this wouldn't be possible. Thank you.
And see you on another ancient site.